Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by a high-performing talent acquisition specialist who has a decade of experience spanning both internal and external recruitment. Taking all that he's learned from his years at Hayes and Dill, he's supporting the growth of one of Germany's best-known VCs and family offices. Focusing on long-term strategic hiring, he works on a limited number of roles per year, but each role brings a very specific set of skills with it, which usually also means that he knows he's not looking for a typical person in that titled position. What does that mean? We'll dive into that. But this is what makes hiring challenging, exciting, but also very strategic in him. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, the People and Talent Acquisition Manager for that global VC, Friedrich von Trott. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I appreciate it. And like I said, your role I find is very specific in the realm of recruitment. You get lots of different types of people. We do high growth kind of recruitment, high street recruitment, niche recruitment. But you have a very unique challenge ahead of you, and we'll dive into it. But it's really about how we're attracting the people that maybe are sitting above the type of position that you're hiring for, and having to convince and really show the full picture to kind of bring them into the team. And I find that's actually interesting with this market because that's where I feel a lot of businesses are trying to aim towards. So I think the knowledge you've got, Friedrich, I'm super excited to uncover. So I think it's going to help a lot of people today, tomorrow, and as recruitment unfolds over the next few years. I think this is where the market's heading. So before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to take it back a step because you've seen internal and external. So you've seen varied team sizes, you've seen varied recruitment structures. To you, what makes a high-performing recruitment team?
That's a good but also difficult question. For me, I think the best example is when I joined Deal. I was the first talent acquisition person there as employee number 170, and I spoke to Alex, the CEO, and he said, "Yeah, we need to focus on hiring. We need to hire a lot of people." So I think within 3 or 4 months, I hired a team of 30 recruiters, and this is not a lot of time. And I always focused on the gut feeling, which fortunately worked out well. Nowadays, I've learned you should not solely rely on your gut feeling, but more on data. I think personality and good leadership is the best for a high-performing recruiting team. Even though I'm not with Deal anymore, I think out of those 30, 25 are still with Deal, which is a ratio I can live with.
Definitely. So I'm glad you moved away from the gut feeling. The data is a better approach, but there still needs to be that element. Is this person going to work out or not? Sometimes your gut does help guide where you're going. Slightly biased in some cases, but we're the human side of things, right? So for you, a high performing recruitment team isn't the individuals necessarily, but it's the ship in total, the leadership, where we go in with that, driving the right people into the right positions. Not, okay, we need an incredible closer, we need an impeccable scheduler, that sort of stuff. That isn't what makes the team high performing. It's the leaders that's setting up the team in the first place.
Of course, certainly you have KPIs which need to be met, but on the other hand, you are always the role model. You are the one who sets the pace, and this is what I tried as good as I could. And being a good example for all my teammates, having an open ear. I had sometimes, I think on the peak when before I promoted senior managers, I had 20 direct reports. So Monday and
Wow.
Tuesday was jour fixe from morning till evening. And I
Yeah.
did that on a bi-weekly basis, but I wanted to be there for my team in order to listen to them, to the problems they might have in their private lives as well, in order to build a strong and reliable connection to them. This, in return, paid back very well as they went all in and did the best they could then in their position. And I think personal relationships are still the glue in everything. Also, when
Mm.
you're building a high performing recruiting team.
So let's take it away from Deal and come into Feastman where we are today, right? And the title of this podcast is somewhat elusive. So it's hiring above the job description, right? And I think when someone reads this, and I'm hoping our listeners probably this will resonate a little bit, you might read it and go, well, why are we hiring above the job description, right? That doesn't make sense. But explain to me, because you have a pretty interesting structure. So explain to me what Feastman and the area that you're in is basically doing.
So Fiesmann, we are still trying to find a good definition of what we are. One could say we are an investment company. Others could say we are a blueprint for modern family office. What we actually do is we invest in two different asset classes. The first asset class is kind of private equity, but with an evergreen structure. So we don't follow the classic PE approach, which usually is 4 to 6 years of optimizing and restructuring and then looking for a profitable exit. We are thinking more in times of 30, 40, 50 years. So we see ourselves as a long-term strategy partner for the portfolio companies we invested in. Second asset class is investments into forestry, regenerative agriculture, renewables, and real estate. And those are the so-called generational investments. And as the name says, we are thinking about 80, 100 and more years of staying with those investments. So this is what we do. We have a very strong focus on sustainable companies who care about CO2 reduction, clean water, education, nutrition, and healthcare. It's what we mainly focus on, and those are the investments we do. In order to do that the way we want to do it, we need a special structure. We are working in a holding with 30 different legal entities. So we have around 120, 130 employees, most of which come from senior management positions, and they convert into individual contributors with us. And this is what you mentioned in your entry question, the difficulty to convince someone who is leading a team of 30 people to become very hands-on. And this is the challenge in my job, to convince people it looks like a step back, but we are looking for people who share our vision, who share our purpose of co-creating living spaces for generations to come, because this is the main challenge nowadays for all of us.
What's the actual benefit, I guess, for Feastman as a company to focus on trying to find? You can take yourself as the example, right? Coming from Deal to them, you inadvertently went from a team of 30 plus direct reports to, I mean, I don't know how many exactly you have
0.
right this second. 0. Okay, fair enough. I was going to say, I don't know how many exactly you have. But that's you are the prime example, right? So what's the actual benefit for trying to target those that maybe are a little over what the job title's saying, but could bring in different elements?
For me personally, I was convinced by the purpose and by the vision of Max Fissmann, our CEO. This was the main reason. And second, I think it was maybe it was the most exciting family office being built up a year and a half ago, and being there and helping to create structures, implement processes, evaluate software, finding the right talent to go this way with us. It felt to me like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and so I could not resist but joining. And I believe this also applies to many of my colleagues, that they need to be convinced by our purpose. It's not only about money, it's about shaping a future business model with a sustainable idea and tackling the main issue of our time.
I think the reason this is so fitting, and you and I have had quite a few conversations, prior to this recording, I'm seeing and experiencing with the businesses that I'm recruiting for almost an identical request without it being to the level that maybe yours is at, the purpose and the vision being the driver, but I'm seeing hiring teams are now looking for that step above. there's a bit more that they're not telling me on the job description straight away. There's a bit more digging I'm having to do, and it usually comes down to things like leadership qualities, change management qualities, things that they're more softer skills. And I think this is really what's deciding who gets hired and who's not, whether or not they want to say it on the job description or not. So I'm starting to see teams are looking for like staff level in a senior position. If you're looking for a founding engineer, you're really looking for a former CTO or director to come back to do it hands-on. So I'm seeing this, and I'm literally working these types of roles right now. So I'm super excited to kind of break this down together to see what you do, if I do anything different, because I've got to get back to sourcing after this. So I might be borrowing something straight away from what you share. Let's see. But I definitely think if you're seeing it and I'm seeing it, other people are seeing this, and I think there's going to be some nuggets of information that hopefully we can uncover. So I want to start at the very beginning of how you recruit. Right. So you gave me the example the other day, sorry, of it was the tax position, right? Hopefully you're happy for us to use this as our example, I guess. So you knew, I guess, full well that you was probably looking for someone who's going to be above the level. So what do you do at that qualification process when you're speaking to your stakeholder? How do you approach this type of conversation, or do you approach it differently to what you did when you was at Deal?
Very different from what I did at Deal, because at Deal we hired 150 people per month. Here we are hiring maybe 5 to 10 a year. So as we only hire very, very few for very, very few positions, we cannot afford to make mistakes. We need to
Mhm.
be very accurate and very precise and very good in hiring the right talent. But maybe I can I can take a step back. So before I speak to my manager, I do a lot of preparation. And this preparation I do with the support of AI. We are embracing AI at Fissmann on many different levels, especially in the P&O, the people and operations team. And we have an enterprise account at ChatGPT, and that means that we are in a safe space, so we can share all our data without having to worry that it goes to the wrong hands in that big corporation. And within those ChatGPT, we created several personalized GPTs, so-called system prompts. We first did with an AI company a promptathon for all our department or for our team
Mm.
in order to learn more about how we can use AI and how it can support us. So out of that, the idea of an assessment API emerged. And an assessment API is basically our framework, our backbone for making hiring more effective and consistent.
Mhm.
Because we want to make better hiring decisions by leveraging customized ChatGPTs. As I mentioned earlier, we want to move away from our solely gut feeling decisions towards data-driven decisions.
Mhm.
And by doing that, we use several different modules, yeah, I mean, we talk to the manager, we know the position he wants, we ask him about the skills he wants in that position, and then we take all that information and go to the first module, which is the job fit. So we generate a scorecard. A scorecard basically lists all the hard and soft skills.
Yeah.
We out of that scorecard we generate a candidate brief. Candidate brief, I mean, you might know it as the job description, but we call it candidate brief as it's really there for briefing the candidate and attracting the candidate. And with that, we use a lot of poetry because, I mean, how boring is a standardized candidate brief? It's this, these are your key responsibilities. This is what you bring. But if you can create a story I mean, we add links to it, to our website, to interviews with our CEO. We make it kind of interactive. And our, yeah, when we look back the last year and a half, once we started using those specified candidate briefs, we had a lot more traction, a lot more applicants in our funnel. And this is what we do in the very first step.
So to break that down then, you're going in with the research. I mean, you've already started to identify before you speak to your hiring manager Are you mapping the market at that point, or is it just the types of things that these prompts are going to be sharing to you? Maybe you might put in what does a typical tax officer do or whatever. So you're doing your research piece and taking that with you to your manager to say, this is what I understand. What do you want? And then you're marrying the two together.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because the hiring manager typically doesn't have a lot of time, so I want to make the most out of it.
Yeah. So you've got questions specifically that you're trying to get out of that conversation, the must-haves that you cannot feel without that conversation to be had. You take that information, then you go into your enterprise level ChatGPT, and then you go through the prompting stage of creating a scorecard that's unique to that one specific job.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, we have different system prompts already ready waiting in ChatGPT, and I kind of just need to type in senior tax manager or CFO, and it brings me out all the necessities, all the skills a standard position would require. Yeah.
So we've got the scorecard. You then create
Mhm.
your job description, as I would call it, or kind of what was the phrase you've used?
The candidate brief.
Candidate brief. So the candidate brief and the job description that you post online,
Mhm.
same or different?
Can you elaborate on that question? So the job description,
Sure.
it's a different type, a different term, but a candidate brief, as I said, is full with poetry, with links. It's interactive. It's
So the
more like
candidate
telling.
brief, you're posting that one as your online version. That's what I'm
Oh
saying.
yes, yeah,
Okay, cool. So
exactly.
there's no difference between, okay, so job description kind of, we'll call it candidate brief because that's your terminology. So that takes you to the point of before you even start outreach, you're going through and you're heavily utilizing AI. The element of doing that then, this is kind of a two-part question for you. So the first part is, what was the time investment to get all of those prompts and structures behind the scenes to the point now where you can just put what you need to in? And now you've done that, what is the time to go from hiring manager to sorry, to the candidate brief posted?
Mhm. Good question. I never really calculated the time we invested or the time we now are saving. But if I remember correctly, we were working at least 2 months on those ChatGPT prompts, those system prompts, and we are also using another AI note taker within our interviews who's
Mhm.
transcribing everything. Um, Probably 2.5 months. And now,
Right.
how much time do I save? Usually it would probably take me a day. Now it takes me 30 minutes.
Oh wow.
It's a
And
tremendous time-saving momentum. And we are not only using that by creating candidate briefs and the
Mhm.
scorecard, we are also using it for the interviews and then collecting all the feedback from the interviews, feeding it into ChatGPT. ChatGPT is summarizing it for us for the final decision panel. Um, there are many variations where we are using AI, and it doesn't only save a lot of time for me, but also for all the other interviewers, for basically the whole participants of the interview panel.
so why use AI in the first place? I think I know the route you're going to go down, but just entertain me for a second.
When I first got here, I didn't have anyone to support me. So my idea was, okay, I need something which can make my life easier.
Mhm.
Hence, I heard of an AI note taker and asked if I could implement that. So we tested it step by step. Many people liked it a lot because it saves you time. You don't need to type a lot of notes while you are interviewing a candidate, which is also not a very nice feeling for the candidate when you're only looking on your keyboard. And that was basically the first step. And then later on, we we understood that ChatGPT, if used in the right way, can make our lives easier and can help us shifting away from the gut feeling decisions to a more data-driven decision. We could have done data-driven decisions beforehand, but we simply did not have the time. And this
Mhm.
is the key element that AI doesn't do decisions for us. It only helps us to summarize all the data we collected during our interview process.
So does it remove the bias from the process?
It minimizes the bias, I would say. Of course, you still have a gut feeling with a candidate, and you debate about that in the final decision panels. But you have so much more data you can rely on, which kind of makes the gut feeling obsolete.
Okay. So I don't want to trump you here, but let's see if I can. That 2.5 months it took you to build those prompts, where did the data come from that if you're on a closed enterprise version of ChatGPT?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not sure
Yeah.
whether I fully
So
understood.
you created prompts that took 2.5 months. Those various modules.
Yeah.
They're now housed inside a closed
Yeah.
enterprise version of ChatGPT. So it's Feastman's copy. Where did that data come from to make those in the first place?
This is data we created over the past years. This is the experience of our people and talent managers, of my colleagues, a little bit of me, and try and error. We had an AI specialist from a company set in the same building and who was helping us, who was an absolute genius and a professional when it comes to using AI, especially ChatGPT. And we tried new things out. I mean, it's a whole new world. There's no written script for it, so it was try and error. Then we built something. It kind of worked. Then somehow it crashed. There was a bug. We needed to redo the whole thing, try something else. And eventually, we now have something which is probably not 100% perfect, but it's something I can use in my daily work, and my colleagues can as well. And this is incredible.
And the reason I say this, right, and I like the fact you say it's not making the decisions for you, because that is my fear that companies will start relying on it to make decisions. As much as we in the talent acquisition space can sit there and say, hell no, we don't want it, eventually we're going to get trumped, I think, where a CEO or a COO or whoever is going to say, like, we need to make decisions more efficient, even more efficient. Let's just get it there. Because my thought process is all of your colleagues' information, your information, past data, it's housed, it was biased to some degree at some point, is now inside this one place where you're feeding more into it. So if you're not using it to obviously make the final decision, great. But there obviously needs to be an element of cautiousness that if we ever get to that point, it's just, the system becomes biased based on who feeds information to it. It just
I,
emulates their bias eventually.
I perfectly agree, and this was never the idea of us or the goal
Yeah.
of letting AI making the decision. It's more about because we have between 3 and 4, sometimes 5 interview rounds. We have case studies, we have
Yeah.
personality assessments, we have, for example,
This
an
plethora
HBII
of
test.
data coming from everywhere.
It's so much data, and
Yeah.
for one person doing recruitment here, even if there are only maybe 5 to 10 positions a year, it's just too much data to handle it. And
Mm.
so the rating and the what people think about a candidate, they write it down and they give ratings. It's mainly collecting all the data, feeding it, and then letting it summarized by the AI in a logic and sensitive way.
Think as well, and if we come to obviously the element of going above the job description title, um, what I've certainly seen is when I speak to leaders, they speak about so many different topics that it's not as easily, you can't easily, it's not as tangible, sorry, as if you're speaking to a software engineer, years of experience, explain to me the project. When you're speaking to more leadership, there's so many different elements you factor in. So soft skills play a much bigger part. So I guess the AI is going to then help formulate that into just, as say, much clearer, much structured. It's also very nice. This is probably so this is the second time on the podcast. Yeah, second time on the podcast that someone's given me something actually real to do with AI instead of just the same thing everyone says. Note takers comes up a lot, which is fine, but you know, it's the building block. So I really like the fact that you guys are taking it further. You might not know, but do you know the cost of the enterprise edition of ChatGPT? just in case someone is curious to explore this route?
I don't know exactly. I know the pro version is $20 per month, and I think the
Something like that.
enterprise version is much more expensive per
Mm,
employee.
okay. I'm just
I
curious
would,
because if someone's in your position right now, this is a really good way that they can emulate the rest of this process as a solo PA
Mhm.
person. I'll do some digging. I'll share it if I can find it. Or if you have a chat internally, let us know. Um, okay, so we are now with the candidate brief. We've got our qualification scorecard, our rubrics. We've spoken to our hiring manager. We are set. We now need to go to market. Let's take this tax position again. You know you're looking for someone who's maybe a little bit more above based on the skills that you've been finding or you've been asked to find. What's your go-to-market strategy?
I mean, before we start the search, we also create interview guidelines for our. I mean, if I go a step back, before we created that assessment API and using ChatGPT in a very personalized way, we created a hiring code for our organization. A hiring code which basically defines the ground rules on how we hire talent, how we interview. It's our shared philosophy and our standards for all interviewers. So
Hmm.
this is how we started this whole thing. Um, Coming back to your question, going into the market, this is then we come to to the different steps in our assessment flow, which is divided into 4 modules. The first one we talked about already is the job fit. Can they
Hmm.
do the job today? In the second step, the assessments come in. So personality and cognition plays a big role for us. Will they think and behave like a FISMAN leader? This is the main question we ask ourselves. In the next steps of interview, we talk about the organization and the future fit. Will they scale with us? Do they fit our org design and our values? And finally, do we have an alignment? Is it a top tier hire? So we are using this data, the structured templates, the multi-stakeholder inputs in order to make no gut decisions. And what's the market strategy behind this? I mean, we are not a traditional recruiting machine. We hire strategic enablers, people who people who drive transformation, sustainability, and international growth. So our market strategy is equal to a strategic talent flywheel. Yeah, you could say so. So we have strategic objectives
Hmm.
in building our future org, winning the global talent, and accelerate transformation. We want to reduce mishires as it's very costly and nerve-wracking. So in the end, we want to create a repeatable process with that.
How do you engage someone to do that? It's nice buzzwords, as it were. But say I'm the tax person.
Yeah.
How are you saying, hey Eden, I like your profile. Come, let's have a chat about Feedman. Like
Mhm,
let's get
mhm,
this going. How are you getting
mhm.
me excited when I know my title is gonna be lower?
Well, I won't tell you in the very beginning that your title is lower, as internally
Mm.
we technically don't have titles. So what I do is, I mean, with such a positions, of course, I have a candidate brief being published, but let's be fair, it's once in a lifetime opportunity if someone applies actually for that position. So I need to do outreaching,
Yep.
direct sourcing on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Um, I try to make the message precise and short, but by addressing personally his experience, some yeah, sweet toothing is definitely included with that. But I also make it a little bit interactive. I try to tell him, okay, I like this and that about your profile. This is who we are. 1 or 2 links, maybe a nice catchy interview with our CEO and our purpose. And I don't attach the candidate brief yet, as I
Mhm.
first want to get in touch with that person. And if I'm lucky enough that someone resonates on my message, I try to bring him on a video call as quickly as possible. If he's hesitant or she's hesitant, then maybe a phone call. Once I have that person on the phone or on the VC, I try to establish as quickly as I can a personal connection with the candidate to create commitment. How do I do that? With a big sense of humor. I try to crack a joke at the beginning to make that person laugh a little bit.
Go on,
And I
what's your
share,
best joke? I'm gonna pause it a second. You've come in as the funny man. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
oh man, the only jokes I can remember, I would never tell a candidate, and I would certainly not tell in a public podcast. I
That is
have terrible.
that's the best get out of jail free card I've ever heard in my life. Wow.
I will tell you afterwards. I can tell you a
Fair
joke,
enough.
but I mean, in
I'll put a poll up. If anyone wants to hear it, I'll share it in the next podcast separately. I don't mind.
okay,
But go
anonymously,
on.
hopefully. Anyways, I'm cracking a joke with a candidate, something which happened to me maybe today. I'm trying to share personal insights from myself. Why do I do that? Because I want to make the candidate feeling comfortable. I want the candidate to open up him or herself, and I want the candidate to feel a connection to me, which
Mhm.
enables or increases his or her commitment. And this is the idea behind it. I mean, in the end, there is no one solution fits all. It's about personality, and this is
Yeah.
what you need to grab at a candidate.
I think, and just speaking out loud from my own experience, when you have something where you know there's going to be a question around title or potential salary might come up, because obviously if they're taking a step down in terms of seniority, there's always a salary element you have to discuss. I agree, by the way, wholeheartedly what you just said there. My approach is very, very similar. So I don't always share the company's name that I'm working with in the first message if it's to a standard position. But if it's to a very specific, like found an engineer, staff level, these sorts of ones, I always do, because they're always usually the ones that come back and say, who is it? Especially to us as externals, right? So I go a little bit further on that. And then I break down the very specific parts that I like about their profile and say, look, before the company, this is why I reached out to you specifically. So that, it kind of disarms them a little bit. You're not just every other recruiter out there. And then share just one or two lines about the company that I think they're going to be interested in and say, do you want to know more? Super, super small. I think it's like, when it's compiled, it's like maybe 6 or 7 lines. And then that usually hooks someone in enough to say, tell me more, or can you send me the qualification or whatever. Video calls for sure. We always try to share the screens, share the product, show them what we're doing. But I always start the conversations exactly the same. Like, tell me how you're coming into this conversation. What do you want? What are you looking at? Are you active? Are you passive? Was it just this role? Because then it helps me understand their mindset of the conversation and helps steer it. Um, but I absolutely agree. I think you need to kind of give a little bit before you can, especially with this kind of level of role. So you're going through the motions of LinkedIn. Is there any other sources that you tend to use, or is it just mostly LinkedIn?
I mean, by the time now we have built up quite a decent talent pool,
Yep.
as we consist, or most of the people working at Fissmann are former leaders, and they are still leaders, even though they don't have a team to manage anymore. But that's a different definition on how you define a leader, and hence they also have a strong and huge network which we can use, and this is what we mainly do before we publish a candidate brief. We first use our talent pools where
Mhm.
where we basically collect great talent. We have spoken in a different context maybe, and it didn't fit at that role, but maybe in another. And then we use our network, and only afterwards we start publishing a role and looking for talent outside. But once I do that, LinkedIn is the place to go. In Germany
Yeah.
or in the DACH region, there's something called Xing crossing, but the only thing I've ever looked for there was, I think, tax assistance in one of my prior
think
jobs
um
because,
I think Zing's changed now. I think it's just a job board. Yeah, I think it's just like a job advert board. I don't think it's a social
see,
platform anymore.
I
Yeah.
haven't logged in many years anymore. So LinkedIn is unfortunately the monopoly. I
Yeah.
wish there was a second or a third one. I mean, you have some things for software engineers, and there are different platforms, but for the talent I'm looking for, mainly senior leaders, C-level, yeah, you find them only on LinkedIn.
Yeah. So I like the fact you're really heavily relying on internal network. A lot of the jobs that we know, a lot of them get filled through referrals. I think it's the absolute first port of call, which sounds mental because I'm an external recruiter and I'm like, I need jobs to work, but it
Yeah,
makes so much sense. Don't advertise. Don't use a recruiter. Don't waste your time. If you've got your colleagues that have colleagues or past colleagues that could help you, it makes so much more sense. Um,
yeah,
so you tap into that resource, it doesn't provide, then you go to market, and then obviously you go through the process you've just shared there, really personal, really specific to that person, obviously coming into the call, and then you tailor based on how they're coming into that chat as well with regards to your interview process. But you're linking back to the core values that you and the team have decided are when you create the interview. So you have your baseline interview structure. Is that right?
um, yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Do you find now that you're kind of coming into a position where you've been at Feastman for a little while now. You've kind of got to grips with it. You've done these big projects. Do you find that you are a better recruiter for doing it like this?
Yes, I think I am, because here I learned a lot of things I didn't know beforehand. I mean, hyperscaling and mass recruiting is very different from the kind of executive recruiting I'm doing here. I did
Mm.
some executive recruiting when I was still working for Hayes,
Yeah.
but not on the level I'm doing it here. And back in the days, it was yeah, not in-house. Here I'm in-house, and I'm part of the organization, so it's a different approach you're going. Um, the level of excellence, I've probably not seen such a high level of excellence as it's lived here. Um, I have to admit it was a little painful for me at the beginning because I come from a startup background. You have a problem, you tailor a solution which maybe fits 80%, and then you start running and the rest you do on the way. Here, it doesn't work like that. There's more of a 110% solution before you are allowed to start
Mm.
running. And I understand why. It's just a question of your mindset and if you can adapt to that new setup, which hopefully I could. I let that other people judge, but so far it worked out quite well.
Well, you're still employed, so that's a,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
positive
not,
sign.
not
Do you
fired
think,
yet.
yeah, fingers crossed this doesn't go live and we have to edit that bit out. No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Do you think this way of recruiting fits a hyperscaling environment, or could it fit a hyperscaling environment?
My gut feeling tells me no, but the data we collected over the past month or years tells me it is possible because with AI you save a lot of time and you could theoretically invest so much into each hire. The question is if it's necessary for each and every position. I think for the
Mm.
more senior position, you should certainly go with such an approach. If it's a very administrative position, it's questionable whether it's necessary and whether it's worth the effort. But overall, I would say yes, it's possible. Maybe not now yet, but a few months down the road, for sure.
Yeah, I think if I take a look into the requests that we have, right, as a team, everyone is saying the same thing now. And I can really own, I mean, I said this to you the other day, we literally qualified another two roles today, and it's the same thing. It's we need get shit done people, doers, people who can lead, but not lead people, but lead initiatives, drive processes. These are like the qualifications that standard roles, didn't have 3, 4 years ago. So I feel like the market is massively moving towards focusing on that excellence profile instead of just a generalist profile now. Um, I'm seeing our approach shift more towards what you're doing.
I think this is partly due to the new tools which are available for each and every employee. And mean, then it's a no-brainer that you expect more from each single employee if he has AI tools or other tools in order to do his job more efficiently and then having more time for extra tasks. And it's yeah, question of costs and how much money you want to spend and you can spend.
And this is just completely off topic now, but do you feel that the last comment you've shared there, do you feel that leads to the potential mass burnout? If we're as a team saying, hey, we're now expecting more from you because you have these tools to speed up your process, we now expect you to actually have more output in other parts of that's not might not necessarily be part of your role.
Theoretically, it could, but it depends on the degree of expectation, and it also depends on the degree of how willing is that person and how capable is that person of using AI. I mean, wasn't there this IT admin in London, I think 8 years back, who basically his main job was to connect all the spreadsheets and basically provide the management with it. I think he earned something like 80,000 pounds a year, and he wrote the code which automatically merged all the spreadsheets. And he wasn't working for 2 or 3 years until someone noticed that there is a code basically doing his job and getting a salary. So if you have smart talent who can do that, then they can avoid a burnout syndrome. Yeah. But if you don't and you don't do it right, of course, burnout is always the danger, especially nowadays in our modern work environment.
Feel like we could talk about this moving forward for more and more time, but I'm conscious that I don't want to come off the topic of where we are too much. But Friedrich, should someone want to pick this up with you and spend more time getting to know you, where's the best place that they can find you?
I think the easiest way is on LinkedIn. Just type
Perfect.
in my name and then I'm happy to have a chat.
And I can vouch for that. You were very happy to have a chat with me. Bear in mind, you and I hadn't spoken much beforehand. So I will put your LinkedIn URL into the description of this. But genuinely, thank you so much. I think, like I said, your approach to recruitment is exactly what I see is happening, that I feel is happening. And I really do hope that people have listened and gone, okay, there could be some elements you can try and borrow, some things that confirm maybe what they're doing. But I think genuinely your application of how you're utilizing AI internally is brilliant. I mean, it's working clearly, and it is a end-to-end application. It's not just one part here, one part there. So I appreciate you spending some time and kind of sharing that through. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real joy to chat with you.
Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Bye.